He was a man sculpted from minding his own, his days a symphony of doing for others. His world, a carefully curated haven, was always interrupted by broken promises. Every action, deliberate and measured, whispered a tale of a soul that sought to just found one to trust. His heart, a broken mirror, mirrored the broken facade he presented to the world. He was, in essence, a man at war with himself, and yet warned anyone that would listen. His life was a testament to his inherent concern. He moved through his days with an almost reverential grace, avoiding confrontation, sidestepping discord, yet chose the path to try to help others. He was trying to bring peace to a world often defined by discord. The over-thought things, or just part of the walls. He sought a sanctuary from the storms that raged around them. His days unfolded with the measured cadence of a well-rehearsed symphony. The rising sun found him in his garden, his hands calloused but gentle, coaxing life from the earth. He tended to his plants with the same quiet devotion he brought to every aspect of his life, nurturing them, watching them thrive under his care. The garden was his sanctuary, a place of quiet contemplation, where he found solace in the rhythms of nature. As the day progressed, he would retreat to his workshop, a space filled with the scent of wood and the whisper of tools. His hands, skilled and sure, transformed rough-hewn timber into objects of beauty and utility. Each piece he created was imbued with his quiet strength, his inherent patience. The workshop was his haven, a place where he could lose himself in the creative process, his mind free from the intrusions of the outside world. Evenings were spent in the warm embrace of his home, a book in his hand, the flickering flames of the fireplace casting dancing shadows on the walls. He would lose himself in the written word, his mind exploring distant lands, his imagination soaring on the wings of stories. His home was his fortress, a place of peace and solitude, where he could shed the weight of the world and simply be. His life, a tapestry woven from the threads of quiet routines, was a testament to his belief in the power of peace. The first tremors of disruption were subtle, almost imperceptible, a discordant note in the symphony of his life, a ripple in the tranquil waters of his soul. He dismissed them as fleeting anxieties, the inevitable anxieties of a life lived in a world that was increasingly out of sync with his own values. He clung to his routines, his rituals, seeking comfort in the familiar. But the serpent had entered his garden, its venomous whispers slowly poisoning the air. The outside world, with its relentless chaos, began to intrude upon his carefully curated sanctuary. The news, once a distant rumble, became a deafening roar, filled with tales of violence, injustice, and suffering. He tried to shut it out, to maintain his island of peace, but the tide was rising, threatening to engulf him. His neighbors, once a source of companionship, became conduits of the encroaching darkness. Their anxieties, their fears, seeped into his world, staining the canvas of his tranquility with shades of gray. He found himself drawn into their conflicts, their dramas, his role as mediator, as peacemaker, tested as never before. He felt the first stirrings of unease, a growing awareness that the world he had so carefully constructed was crumbling around him. The pressure built, slowly, inexorably, like a gathering storm. The whispers became shouts. The ripples turned into waves, crashing against the walls of his sanctuary. He felt the first tremors of fear, the unsettling realization that his carefully constructed world was no match for the forces that were gathering around him. The quiet man, the man of peace, was being pushed to the edge. The final blow came unexpectedly, a brutal act of violence that shattered the fragile peace he had so carefully cultivated. It was a violation, a desecration, a blow struck at the very heart of his being. He felt a surge of rage, hot and consuming, unlike anything he had ever experienced before. It was a primal scream trapped within the confines of his soul, threatening to break free. He retreated into himself, his mind a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The pacifist in him recoiled from the violence, the very thought of retribution anathema to his core beliefs. But the pain, the outrage, the sheer injustice of it all clawed at him, demanding a response. He was caught in a tug-of-war between his nature and the demands of the situation, his soul a battleground where the forces of peace and violence clashed. The decision, when it came, was not a conscious choice but a visceral response. It was a primal scream, a roar of defiance, a rejection of the passivity that had defined his life. The quiet man, the man of peace, was gone, replaced by a being fueled by rage, driven by a thirst for vengeance. He was a force of nature unleashed, his fury a whirlwind of destruction. He moved with a purposefulness he had never known before. His hands, once gentle, became instruments of destruction. His eyes, once filled with compassion, now burned with a cold fire. The world around him faded into insignificance, his focus narrowed to a single point, the source of his pain. He was a man transformed, his humanity eclipsed by the consuming fire of his rage. He became a whirlwind of violence, his actions swift and brutal. There was no hesitation, no remorse, only the cold, hard satisfaction of retribution. Each blow struck was a release, an exorcism of the pain and rage that had consumed him. He was no longer the man he once was, the man of peace, the man of quiet contemplation. He was something else entirely, a creature forged in the crucible of violence, his soul forever scarred by the flames. The storm passed, leaving behind a landscape of destruction. The air, thick with the stench of violence, hung heavy around him. He stood amidst the wreckage, his body trembling with the receding tide of adrenaline, his mind struggling to comprehend the enormity of what he had done. The quiet man, the man of peace, was a distant memory, a ghost haunting the ruins of his former self. He looked at his hands, stained with the blood of his vengeance, and felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He had crossed a line, breached a barrier that could never be uncrossed. The violence he had unleashed, the fury that had consumed him, had left an indelible mark on his soul. He was no longer the man he once was, the man who sought solace in silence, the man who believed in the power of peace. He had become the very thing he abhorred, a creature of violence, a bringer of pain. The world he had so carefully constructed, his sanctuary of peace, lay in ruins around him. He was a stranger in a strange land, adrift in a sea of his own making. The price of his vengeance, he realized with a chilling certainty, was his own soul. The aftermath was a blur of whispered conversations, of accusatory glances, of a community grappling with the unthinkable. The quiet man, the man they thought they knew, had become an enigma, a source of fear and speculation. His actions had shattered the illusion of peace, exposing the raw underbelly of their shared existence. He was an outcast, a pariah, his past erased by the single act of violence. He retreated further into himself, seeking solace in the silence that had once defined him. But the silence now held a different quality, a coldness, a hollowness that mirrored the emptiness within him. The world around him seemed to shrink, the colors muted, the sounds muffled, as if a veil had been drawn between him and the life he once knew. He was a ghost in his own life, haunted by the specter of his actions. He tried to find solace in his routines, in the familiar rhythms of his life. But the garden held no joy. The workshop offered no escape. The books no longer transported him to distant lands. The world he had so carefully constructed had become a prison, the walls closing in on him, suffocating him with the weight of his guilt. He was trapped in a purgatory of his own making, his soul stained with the blood of his vengeance. The quiet man, the man of peace, was gone, consumed by the flames of his own rage. In his place stood a stranger, a man forever marked by the violence he had unleashed. The world he had sought to escape, the world of chaos and conflict, had claimed him in the end, twisting him into a shape he no longer recognized. The price of his silence, the cost of his retreat from the world, was his own soul. He had become a living testament to the fragility of peace, a cautionary tale whispered on the wind. His story served as a stark reminder that even the most deeply held beliefs, the most carefully constructed sanctuaries, could crumble in the face of overwhelming pressure. The quiet man, the man who believed in the power of peace, had become a symbol of its ultimate futility. He was a living paradox, a contradiction in terms. The man of peace had become the agent of violence, the quiet man the architect of his own destruction. He was a walking embodiment of the duality of human nature, a stark reminder that within each of us lies the potential for both great good and unspeakable evil. His journey was a tragedy, a cautionary tale, a testament to the enduring power of the human heart in all its flawed and contradictory glory.